This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Malleary and this is X-Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Richard Thomson. Now, this podcast is about former police and military personnel, and Richard is a former member of the Royal Marines. However, he is the local candidate for Braintree for the Reform Party. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you for organising this. It's always great to
You're welcome.
to chat to ex-service people and like-minded people. So thank you very much.
No, that's absolutely fine. I come from a policing background, and my dad was in the military, and he was in the police as well, which is why I do this. But where did it all begin for you, and what was your inspiration to join the Royal Marines?
Well, I think as a child, I think my parents were really quite keen on doing something in uniform to give a bit of discipline and that kind of stuff. So, I went through the sort of Beavers, Cubs, Scouts and the likes, and then I did a bit of cadets, and I was even in the Marine Cadets in Hornchurch when I was a child as well. So when I got a bit older, I've got an older brother who's 2 years older, and he was the first to sort of show an interest. Really, there's not been many military background in my family, but he did it. He joined the Marines, and he said to me that there's no way you could do that. So obviously I had to then go and prove him wrong. So yeah, I joined and served 8 years. So
So where did you sign up? What recruitment office did you go to?
Well, at the time I was living different location in Essex, so the only recruitment centre that was open at that time near me was in Ilford. So that's the centre I went to. Don't think it's there anymore, unfortunately. But yeah,
Sure, it's probably not, to be honest. But so you've gone in there, you've done your educational stuff at school, you've gone in there. Was it always the Marines that you were going to go for? If anything else had come on the table, if you failed the exam or whatever you have to do, would you have gone into another part of the service?
I don't know, really. It's a good question. Possibly. For me, it was just it was the Marines. I did the reservists for some time before joining, because I'm quite impatient, and as I was studying and things in school and sixth form, I had to do something really to see a bit of progress, and that's what I had my heart set on. That's what I was doing. So I was on track, so that I was joining the Marines. There was no deviating from that. Had it have not worked out for one reason or another, then I probably would have reanalyzed my options and chose something else. I was always someone that, I suppose, looking back at my life now and how it shaped me, that I couldn't see another option. I was always going to do the Marines or military or something like that.
So you're a reserve prior to joining the regular service. Where did you do your reserve work?
In Bermondsey in London. So you have, going back a fair time now, it feels like several lifetimes ago for me, but we went to Bermondsey. You've got different stages of training there, and obviously for the Marines at the time it was 32 weeks of training. I'm not sure exactly what it is now. I think it's closer to 40 maybe, but for that you had the sort of phase 1 Alpha and phase 2 Bravo training phases, and it takes quite some time. So I think I got sort of just to the halfway point when I then decided to go for regular service. So I didn't actually complete the training for reservists. I was doing that whilst studying in school, and then just thought, right, okay, it's time now to go for it. So I took myself to Lympstone and did 32 weeks there.
So you get on the train and you go down to Lympstone and you queue up with everybody else that's got off the train and wait for the sergeant to tip up, or the corporal, whoever it is, and say, right, get on this bus. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was you're bringing me back and making me feel sick. So yeah, you get on the train, you get there. Initially, you do various different tests that you have in the recruitment centre, and then after that, you have to go to some gym that does the sort of tests, the basic initial tests that you have to do X amount of pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and then you've got to run a mile and a half, in a certain time and things like that on the treadmill. And then if you pass all that, then they say, right, okay, you can now go to Lympstone to do a potential Royal Marines course, so PRMC. And it's funny. I mentioned my brother earlier. I remember he said to me, we're talking about other family members or friends like now, and he says, "Oh, you really need to just try really hard, and that's what they're looking for and things." When I told him I was going to do it, he said to me, "Don't you fail. I don't want to tell my mates that my little brother's joining, and then you fail the PRMC." So there was a bit of pressure. And you get to Lympstone, and it's essentially a long weekend. So you get there, you don't know what to expect. Obviously, everyone's very young and green behind the ears and things, and they say, right, get your bags, and then they sort of give you a bit of I suppose a mental bashing. The idea is to try to make you feel uncomfortable, and it's just the weekend of sort of physical exercises, you can imagine, to try to sort of get you to want to leave, I suppose. But the saying's right that they do want you just to see you try. As long as you've got that desire and that willing, they can work with it. So it's not actually the physical test so much; it's more the mental fortitude that you need. But yeah, it's a horrible I suppose it brings it back, and you look back at how you felt at that time. So yeah.
What time of year was it? What time of year did you go down to Lympstone?
When I started, I can't remember when I did the PRMC. When I started just after Christmas, so it was around sort of February time.
Nice and cold.
So yeah, it was. Although if thinking about it strategically, it's probably not the bad thing to do. I mean, I didn't think of it that way. I just joined when I was able to join. I think it was the 5th of February. Actually, it rings a bell. But you start going into the field, you start doing exercises, you start learning more tactical skills and things like that. So really, I guess that the initial times that you do that, yes, it's going to be cold, but you're not fully tactical. You're still learning the basics. So I guess it makes it a bit easier. I mean, having the heat like we've got today as we're filming, has its own set of problems. So I mean, later on in my career, that maybe we'll touch on, I did other training and things like that, and heat exhaustion and things like that is something you really need to worry about. So then you need to carry loads of extra kilos of weight in water.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just saying that I mean, I remember, like you said, it was cold. There was many times where they have to do the wet and dry routine. Many recruits, if they're listening to this as it when it goes out, they'll be sweating and dreading the wet and dry routine. Make you go through Peter's Pool in Woodbury Common, get completely soaked, so that just before you go to bed, so that you've then got to do your correct routine. You get out of your wet kit, put your dry stuff on to go to sleep, wake back up at 3 in the morning or whenever it is that you're on sentry, and then put all your wet kit back on. And there's times where I'm having to sort of break my trousers up because they're frozen solid. So I feel sorry for them now. Whenever it's a miserable looking cold day, I think to myself, there's somebody out there right now, and obviously for Lympstone it'll be Woodbury Common, but anybody else that's doing anything like that, I do feel a little bit in my heart for them.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. What year did you join?
It's 2005.
What unit did you go to?
So I went to 4-2 Commando,
which is based in
Plymouth, actually. Plymouth. Yeah, so I was based there. I felt quite lucky. I joined a relatively senior troop, so it's a manoeuvre support group. So it was where all the anti-tankers went and played people like that. And it was formed part of command company. So you had recce troop there with the snipers. You had anti-tankers, mortars, and things. So it's quite an interesting unit. I think a lot of people generally go to the different squadrons. You've got like squadrons and talking about companies, so J Company, K Company, M Company, things like that. And that's you sort of have those people that just come from training, quite inexperienced. You have obviously the corporals that have got the experience and sergeants and things like that. But yeah, for me to join, where I did straight away, it was actually really quite interesting. And straight out to Norway as well. As soon as I passed training, went straight on an Arctic deployment, which was a bit of an eye opener as well.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah, I've got some friends who were in 2-9 and they used to love going up to Norway and doing their stuff up there. But it's a great world.
Definitely. I mean, I was fortunate enough, I got to do it 3 times. So really loved it. Such a lovely place as well. The country is amazing. Whereas the last one I did, we spent a lot of time on a boat as well, on a vessel that we had. And the water is just crystal clear, absolutely crystal clear. It's an amazing place.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was out there when he was in the military as well. But so you're a young Royal Marine, 2005, and the world is different. There is already conflict taking place. We've got 7/7 takes place in 2005. Was that right? Was that 7th of July 2005, I believe? And the battles are taking place. You know, we're in theatre out in the Middle East. At what point did you get deployed to Afghanistan?
So I was part of Herrick 5 that went out. I think it was in 2007 for me. I think I did the sort of tail end really of that deployment. I was there for about sort of 3 months or so for my first deployment. As I was sort of booked on a course beforehand. But yeah, so I went out and to the tail end of Herrick 5, went to Kajaki. We spent predominantly most of our time in Kajaki, and actually, obviously, there's the film Kajaki. My deployment was not long after the sort of experience that the paras that they had out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener, and obviously, had a good understanding about what to expect from talking to some of the colleagues that I had at the time, and obviously hearing things that had been happening, stuff like that.
What route did you take? I mean, you'd have gone into Cyprus and then
yeah
and changed aircraft in Cyprus and then Hercules into Afghanistan.
Yeah and back again the same route as well.
And what was that like? You've landed in Cyprus, you've done all your pre-deployment training, and all of a sudden you're getting in this Hercules. What was the atmosphere like? Because you're flying into a war zone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose anxious, really. Talking to everyone that we had done and things like that. And as I was heading out there, predominantly a lot of the people that were going out there were coming back off of having some R&R or redeploying out there. So it wasn't, like one of the first few flights, perhaps maybe that some of the other chaps would have dealt with. I was actually, going in with people that sort of knew what to expect. So it probably wasn't as anxious as those other flights where people didn't have that. But for me personally, it was very anxious. As you're coming down, you're told to put your helmets and body armor on, and as the plane's getting lower, and things like that. So yeah, it was. And then when you land as well, we landed. It was dark. It just seems like you're there, and this it was in Bastion. There's a huge base, lots of things going on, different surroundings, atmospheres, and stuff like that. So, yeah, very apprehensive, to be honest, and not really sure exactly where or how it was gonna go really.
Before you were deployed, was your brother still in the Marines?
Yes, yeah, he's still serving now.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. The second deployment I did it with him. I think there's probably not many people out there that actually deployed with their brother. We was on the same jobs together and everything for some time, and until the sergeant major realised and then separated us. To be honest, probably rightly so as well. To be fair,
yeah, because I mean, you have to write a letter, don't you? Before you leave, you have to write your letter to your family so that if anything untoward were to happen. And your family had 2 sons out there, or 2 uncles, or 2, whatever the dynamics are. What was that like for you as an individual and for your family that were back home, having 2 members of the same family out there?
Well, I dread to think my mum, she's a bit of a worrier, so she would have been, definitely having some bad days, thinking about things. I tried to, keep up to date with her as much as possible. But the thing is, where I did the second deployment, the unit I was based with, it was in Dorset. We're based there, and they're very, close knit, very family orientated. So they'd give a lot of updates. They keep the families in the loop with everything and reassure them best they can, and that kind of stuff. So that was quite good of them to do that, really, because two sons out there at the same time, the same deployments. I couldn't imagine what they're going through, and I hope, to be honest, I don't as well. So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. What was your first engagement? You've obviously, you're out there. It's not a tea party. What was the first engagement like with the enemy?
Yeah, so when I landed in Bastion, eventually made my way to Kajaki, the first sort of day that I got there, my unit was based up on there's 4 different peaks in Kajaki that, and as maneuver support group, they would provide a lot of the sort of, HMGs, GPMGs, a lot of the sort of, covering fire really for any operations that are going down. So they were up on the peaks looking at that, but I sort of ended up going out to get a ground familiarization. So as soon as I got there, I didn't really have much time to turn around, chuck my kit somewhere, get all rigged up with everything that we needed to, and then sort of head out on a patrol, in the area. And yeah, that was it was an eye. I mean, you do training and everything you can to prepare yourself so that your acting is like second nature to you, and you know exactly what the expectations are and how you should react. And you obviously have your brothers in arms next to you, so you do everything together, and you know what they know what they're doing and stuff like that. But I think for the first time, I think hearing the bullets going past you, because you can't simulate that on the ranges, or if you're firing on range where you're doing the field firing exercises with live or blank ammunition, you don't have anyone ever shooting at you. So to see the sort of ground kicking up in the area and stuff as well, it's really is quite daunting. It's something I'll remember, the sound of the rounds coming in, really remember it forever. But during the moment, you're acting on instinct essentially, and it's drilled into you to how to act. You've got the adrenaline going and everything else. It's only afterwards, really, when you sit down and think about it. Probably not even during the deployment. Probably, really, I sort of thought about it, months later, when you sort of sit there and you sort of think, cool, but what happened here or what happened there, and how it could have been different, or what happened to this guy or that guy, could have happened to you. And I suppose it goes through everyone's mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I interviewed a guy called Simon Maloney, who's the last recipient of the CGC, and I mean his story and your story, they're all amazing, because it's a battle that we were involved in that actually there's no winners. You know, you've had, did you lose people on the tour?
Yeah, we did, unfortunately. There was a couple of guys, and I think during the first few patrols that I was on for ground familiarization, we had a few injuries, but no deaths. When I joined the team on Sparrowhawk East, Sparrowhawk West, I was on, then you hear over the radios, you're providing the sort of covering fire and everything else. It's horrible to hear on the radios that we've got a P3 or a P2 or a P1, and obviously P4 is less urgent because unfortunately you can't help, they're unfortunately gone, right? Yeah. So hearing that it's always horrible.
And you feel helpless because you're stuck away, that you can't run down the hill and help them, and they can't be medevac because it's dangerous to get a helicopter in there. So somehow you've got to get people out. I mean, it must be absolutely terrifying. I can only imagine. Where else did you serve during your time? Norway is completely different to Afghanistan. Was there any fun bits in between?
Well, I did have. So I essentially no. But I was supposed to go to Diego Garcia, actually, which is in the Caribbean. Which after because I did a signals course and I became a signaller. And there was a placement out there, that I could have taken on the after finishing the signals course, but I had already put in for doing a different role, based in Dorset. So I thought it would be fun to do this in Diego Garcia and have a bit of a jolly for a 2-year posting there. But I just sort of thought, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm focused on doing, so I'm going to crack on, doing that instead. So unfortunately, I let go of the opportunity.
How did you feel when you left Afghanistan and you've been involved in battles and you've lost friends and you've been involved where people have been killed and all that? How did you feel when you got back on the Hercules, knowing that you were now flying to Cyprus and that you would never be returning to Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I guess I didn't know that I wouldn't be returning. So obviously, I did, and we knew that the rotation, was going to be quite demanding. I'm not sure what Herrick's, the Corps got involved in afterwards. I'd have to look it up, but I did go back out there again. When we was flying back to Cyprus, obviously we were quite relieved to have it finished. I think there was towards the end when we finished and we wrapped up and we left Kajaki, there was talk that we were going to go to Sangin, which at the time was really sort of different area, different province. It was really sort of kicking off, and there was a lot of fighting. That the enemy was really quite close to the base there, and we had to do a convoy taking a lot of the vehicles back from there back to Bastion. And as you can imagine, the appetite for that was not there. The lads were just thinking about, but now they're rolling down Kajaki, and we handed over Kajaki to the army unit that turned up. We were just focused on really like, okay, we're sort of out in the woods now. Just spend some time in Bastion. Start planning on going home. And getting on the flights back home. So we then had to go off to Sangin, a lot of mortars coming down, a lot of fighting to jump on some vehicles to then hope that there's no, mines or anything put down. But once everyone had got on the flights and we got into Cyprus, essentially they kept us there for, I'm not sure how many, it might have been 2 or 3 days for enforced fun, when everyone's thinking about going home. And essentially they just, handed everyone, crates and crates of beer and said, right, blow your steam off now before you go home, really. And obviously everyone did. And then, we went home for a pre-deployment leave, post-deployment leave, rather.
But do you think that decompression, because some people deal with decompression after the fact better than others, do you think people were identified within that system who were traumatized by what had taken place, or were they literally given a few cans and told to go back and everything will be fine?
Yeah, I mean, they're not accounted for, really. I mean, I don't know what it is now, obviously, with the way in which they do the decompression. At the time, for me, it really wasn't. For some people, yeah, there's no problem. They process things differently. As a young lad, I didn't really think too much about anything, and for some time afterwards. But there was definitely people that would have benefited from actually having to have maybe even some enforced counseling just to understand it themselves, and how to deal with it. I get the idea of chucking a few crates of beer at everybody and saying go nuts now so you don't go nuts in Plymouth High Street. But really you're missing out on a lot of people that could have really benefited from having some serious talks. There was a counsellor. I think the way that we look at things now is a lot better than how we did back then, and like sort of 2007. Back then, if somebody came out to sort of say, if anyone needs to speak, if anyone wants to talk to anybody about anything, then I'm going to be over here for the next couple of hours, let me know. And obviously nobody does, because they don't want to be the guy that's needs to go over and have a talk and and whatever else. There was a stigma about it a little bit. You shouldn't need that. You shouldn't need to talk about it. And as a result, I think there was a few people that really sort of suffered because of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're still suffering today. I've interviewed a number of people who've gone through the process. And on the counter side, I know a guy called Ian Moore, who's a brilliant, brilliant author, lives in France, and he used to go out and he was one of the acts. He was a stand-up comedian, and he'd go and do the stand-up for the guys and girls that are coming back. And he said it was one of the most sobering experiences he ever had, because you had people rolling around in laughter and then people sitting in the corner that were just in floods of tears because their best mate had been killed literally 48 hours beforehand, just before they jumped on the aircraft. How long did you serve in the military after coming back from Afghanistan?
So I think I have to get my dates right. I think I came back in, must have been around April-ish time, 2007 for the first deployment. The second deployment, I think I must have came out in probably middle of 2010.
Right.
And then I left in October, end of October 2012.
Right.
So I guess a couple of years really after the second deployment.
So you get back to the UK, and this is a strange question, but what's the process for receiving your medals for deployment? What do they do?
I think I missed it, to be honest with you. I think I was on some course or something. But what they did was, I think there was like a parade in Plymouth in the base, where everyone sort of stood there, and then you had the CO of the unit deliver a speech on the how everyone performed and on the tour, and basically giving a bit of a chest thumping sort of speech for everybody, and then they would sort of go around and give the medals out. But I think that there was probably not everybody that did it that way. Like I said, I wasn't at that ceremony, so I think realistically, because everyone's obviously got their name on it and their military number and stuff like that, so I don't see the logistics working that well to be able to give everybody their medal like that. So I think you actually had to go to like the quartermasters to sort of sign for it.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, it'd be in somebody else's drawer if you do it personally. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because the medal serving ceremony, or presenting ceremony, it's closure of that particular chapter. But that chapter went on, didn't it? Because there were more Herricks and so on and so forth. And there's those iconic images of the troops with the final push out of Afghanistan, where people are clinging to aircraft and what have you. How do you feel now that you're back in the UK, you've left the military? How do you feel now that you've gone through this process of a war and there's no final result? How do you feel as an individual?
Yeah, it's difficult to sort of reconcile. I feel the reasons that we were there for. Really, I think that there was plenty of places across the globe, even in Africa, that would have, for the same justifications, we would have been there over where we were deployed. So it's difficult, and at the time, I guess I wasn't as politically active as I am now. So it's tended to sort of take my head away from those sort of issues, especially whilst I was serving. Afterwards, you start to get quite frustrated, I think, with it.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at, I think, some of the lack of procurement and equipment that was given to our armed forces as well. So it's difficult. It's difficult to look at it with real justification of thinking that it was something that really should have been, it shouldn't have happened in my view.
I mean, look, I think the war against terror was absolutely right. After 9/11, we needed to do something. I think that if you do something, you do it properly and you put your foot on the gas until you finish it. That's my view. To walk away, I've interviewed Afghani interpreters who were left behind.
Yeah,
it became futile, if that makes sense, and it exposed a lot of people who did an awful lot of good work for the Allies.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. but what the deployment was, in my eyes and where we were fighting a different battle than we was, fighting for, disrupting the terror networks and terror training facilities. We were doing a ground game where we were occupying ground and holding it, and then needing to go back over the same ground again and again and again. And it was just the risk wasn't worth a lot of the rewards. Some of the areas that we were doing that, I don't really think that we was benefiting the overall cause. And when we went into Afghanistan, a big part of it was to say that we was going to disrupt the narcotics and the poppy production. And of course, when ISAF took the sort of operations that they did, poppy production went up by about threefold. So it didn't really have any of the impact that you thought that it was supposed to have, and a lot of the reasons that were given for us to be there, I don't think were really justified. There was a lot of other areas that were training terrorist organisations that were having that sort of impact, and I think the focus really should have been different. But then I was just the Marine on the ground. I didn't have the bigger picture. Perhaps maybe I'm missing something. It's just from my perspective.
No, I don't think you are missing anything, but yeah, that's so when you come to the end of your time, what was the motivation to leave the military?
Yeah, it's a good question. I sort of found myself sort of thinking, well, I've done at that point about 8 years. I was really happy with where I was and what I'd achieved. I'd sort of initially set out with some goals of what I wanted to do, and had really sort of felt like I'd done that. So I now sort of thought, well, I can either stay in the service and make a career of it, and that would be one option, or the other option would be to leave now if I wanted to do anything else and really have any kind of substantial career at something else. Because otherwise, you leave it too long, and then you're leaving and you're starting from, I suppose, the bottom of the professional ladder. Yeah. So that was my thought process, and I thought, well, I can achieve what I wanted to. I can perhaps maybe now try my hand at something else, and if I miss it too much, because to this day I still do, then I could have rejoined.
Yeah, well, and what you've done, something that so many people would love to have done, and they didn't have the courage to take it on. So and I'm very passionate about the military. It's something that I hold very dear to my heart. What did you do when you left?
Well, I feel like I had a bit of a weaning off period, like a transition period, because I left and I did maritime security for a couple of years. I don't know if you spoke to any chaps that have done that before.
Andy Merrick, he's a former warrant officer in the Royal Marines. He went off and did that.
Yeah. So
now.
It was good. It was good because you sort of feel like you're still part of it a bit, because everyone else that I was working with and the company that I was working for, they were ex-military, ex-Marines as well, and things like that. So you got to sort of feel like you're still there a little bit, until eventually after a couple of years, the money started to go a bit, and I thought, well, really, I need to get on with what I said I was going to do, and left Neverland and got a real job.
Did you have many engagements whilst you're on the vessels, with the pirates?
No, not really. I think when I started doing it, it's when it flared up and it was sort of dying down. And to be honest with you, I was quite fortunate not to have, too much. So there was a couple of suspicious vessels, a couple of warning shots here and there, and really that was it. I think from my experience of it, they're more opportunists really, and if they see that you've taken the vessel has taken proper anti-piracy measures, then it's not worth their hassle. They'll continue fishing or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, Ben Close, who's somebody else I've interviewed on here, he's got a couple of things. One, he shot a journalist from a Sanger who failed to stop. This is out in Afghanistan. Failed to stop, and he shot him through and killed him. And then he left and went and did the naval sort of maritime piracy stuff. And it was very kinetic. He had a number of incidents where he ended up shooting the pirates. But it's a funny old setup. And I was watching the other day. They're still at it.
Yeah.
but I don't think they
Yeah.
get the same level of security.
No, no. Well, I mean, I don't know where the industry now is, to be honest with you. I think that when it was a bit more of a hot topic, the insurance for the vessels that were going through that area, it meant it was more cost efficient for them to go slower, but have the security on board. And because there'd been quite a number of attacks and things like that, then they wanted to have the security that had the right background, military from the UK. They needed to have all these different accreditations and things like that. And towards the end of my time there, I think that the risk had died down enough that they could warrant spending a lot less on the security. So they were getting, different companies that wasn't necessarily the sort of UK military-based companies.
Okay.
So then they could drop the price a fair bit, But the idea that they want is they want to go at a slower speed, so they're not using as much diesel and things like that. They haven't got to wait in the port and with demurrage charges. So they want to go at the speed they want to go at, which obviously makes them a target. So, but yeah, now that the threat's died down a bit, I mean, I assume it has. I don't think that the money's in it for.
So you conclude your maritime security role. What do you do then?
I then was speaking to a friend of mine, and he was working for essentially a commodity trading firm, and he was a systems admin. Well, he was in charge of the whole system really, so booking their trades, booking their exposure and risk and things like that. And he just sort of said that they were looking for somebody to sort of bring on. I did explain to him that I don't have any experience in doing that. And he said that would be fine because, I know you, I can train you, like I know I can work with you. So, you can come by basically. So, just happened to be quite fortunate in that respect. It was an excellent opportunity. I was getting to the point where, you go away and you can send your loved ones all these lovely pictures of the hotels that you're staying in, but 99% of the time, you're surrounded by a big blue ocean for all around the horizon. You've got no internet, and you sort of feel like you're sort of at the end of the world. So it was time to really kind of think about what's the next opportunity really, and try to go for that. So when this opportunity came, I was really happy. I love to learn. I'm quite insatiable like that. It meant I could stay back in the UK and build up a career really. So I stayed there for about 2 years, and now I'm working at a different place. I'm sort of senior management there as well, and for intense periods, really good job. I'm really happy. Really very fortunate.
Brilliant. And that's in the financial world, isn't it? Now
it is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's basically a company's called Ion Group, and they've got lots of different platforms that do deal with commodities trading and things like that. So I sort of run the European desk of the analysts and managers that service the customers.
Fantastic. So we are now in 2024, and Richard Thomson decides that he wants to be the MP for Braintree in Essex. Now, what was your motivation to join the Reform Party?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Throughout my I suppose professional life that we spoke about, I've always been relatively politically interested, probably stemming from maybe my tours in Afghan, where I started to look at sort of why we was there and the decisions that were made. But really, I've not been politically active at all. Just sort of been interested, and as I've got older, I've got more and more interested. For me personally, it's more the last 4 years. I think it's just been a real eye opener for the way things have been managed or mismanaged, should I say. The higher and higher taxes now, leaving the sort of basic rate of income tax that went the threshold where you start paying the basic rate. They're leaving it as it is. So with things like the cost of living crisis, rents going up, we now pay about 20% more for a food shop than we did before the cost of living crisis, and it just seems to me that there's no real party, in my view, as I've looked across the different spectrum and flavors of political parties, they've really got an answer for any of it, especially I suppose when it comes to immigration. think immigration is something that we do need in terms of the skills that we need. But we've got, I suppose, was it 2022 net migration was, over 700,000. Last year it was 685,000. That's net figures. Most of those are dependents. And I sort of felt like, well, at the moment, with the cost of living as it is, with people struggling, the Exchequer has to spend about 13 to 14,000 on average per person as a dependent. And it gets on average about £11,000 for someone in full-time employment. So for me, it makes sense to sort of freeze the immigration, let our infrastructure catch up. Rents have gone up by about 20 to 30% in the last 3 years. House prices are going up. If you're not on the ladder, you're never going to get on the ladder anymore. So, for my children and their children, they won't be able to really afford any housing. It seemed to be that, with especially with illegal immigration, with the amount of money that we were spending on the Rwanda scheme, as well as housing, then per day, and the money that we're giving to France as well, that, if we had an effective border force, meaning we applied for, if we went to Heathrow and we tried to make a run for the E-gates at Heathrow, you'd be stopped, you'd be detained, and you'd be stopped from entering that way. If you come from the Channel, then you're picked up, and you're ushered in by either border force or RNLI, and you're taken away and put up in accommodation. And I just sort of think, if we actually had a border force that applied force at the border as it should do, then we would have been able to have lowered income tax. We would have been able to ease the cost of living. So there was all of those things really that Reform was saying. But I thought, okay, they can be relatively divisive to people that haven't been sort of taught critical thinking or really know substantial amount about things. So then it became, all the other parties unpopular. They didn't want to touch it. But it was perpetuating the problem, really. So I thought a conversation needed to be had about it, and I thought the only party really that was really talking about it was Reform. And then from my own experiences as well, I think with the way that things have been handled, I remember sort of being quite animated and talking with my wife about a few things. And she said, well, you're really passionate about it. You should go for it. You should actually, really sort of, put yourself forward and do it. I mean, I'm quite happy. I've had a very sort of, interesting background. I feel quite, happy with my accomplishments in life, and especially where I am now, with, wife and got children and, a good job. We're quite happy. I didn't need to sort of get into politics. But I just felt really quite passionate about it, and the more I started looking, I'm obviously standing in Braintree as well, and I feel like a lot of the people, when I knock on doors and I do the street stalls and I do different sort of meetings and things like that, a lot of the time they say that they don't feel represented. They don't hear back. There's no surgeries where they can speak to the MP, whether it's this constituencies or others. I don't want to point fingers, but that this is the feedback I hear. And obviously, I come from service. It was obviously military. Like I said, it does feel a couple of lifetimes ago. But I am passionate about helping people and being of service. So when I hear that, and then I sort of feel the sort of cost of living and immigration. You look at the house prices, and you look at the way the NHS is handled, with the funding that goes into it. It's almost like when I was in the military, because I know how the budget works. You have all of the managers that spend the money, and they'll say, "Cool, we need to spend this, or we're not going to get it next budget." Yep. So then they rush around to spend the money on things that's not needed. So procurement is terrible. There's so much waste in it, and it really just needs someone with a bit of leadership to sort of say, right, we need to look at being more efficient and make these cuts here and make these cuts there to make this a better institution for example, the national health. It needs to have that reform. Excuse the name there, but it needs to have that investigation as to how it's being run, and do it efficiently as possible.
I absolutely agree. I'm an undecided voter, and I'm going to be really candid with you. It's the first time in my adult life. I'm 59 on Saturday, and it's the first time since the age of 18 that I actually feel like I'm a castaway in the political system. I don't feel attracted to anyone. No disrespect to you, and and the reason I say that is because I think that I'd happily pay more taxes if I thought the money wasn't going to be squandered. And that's where I'm at. I just feel that the monies that I already pay are being squandered on an inefficient health service, public sector. I believe that the current government would happily drive the public sector into the ground and allow the private sector to take it on. And that would be their way of relinquishing their responsibility. But we can't work like that. We need to have a very strong public sector. And if you've got a strong public sector, you've got a strong community. And if you've got a strong community, then everything works well together. But at the moment, it's so fragmented.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that I mean, especially with the current government, they and this is in my humble opinion, the same with the plans and manifestos we've seen with the other parties. They are looking at wealth distribution rather than wealth creation. You need to make a system that puts money in people's pockets to grow the economy, so that they're spending in small to medium-sized businesses. The greedy exchequer will still get the money from taxes from people spending on goods and services. We can't just say that if we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years, the highest amount of government spending in almost 70 years, and the highest government deficit in 70 years, that the way out of that is more taxes. We've got the high streets going bust, and other businesses not able to continue being competitive and going under. We've got so many people on universal credit or benefits because it's not cost effective for them to be in work and in employment.
Yep.
So really, more of the same is just going to cause more of the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think with that, and the way in which that we see our politicians now as well, I think there isn't any trust with any of it. There's no trust. Things get promised in manifestos that aren't delivered, and if you're in a safe seat, then you are unaccountable. You're not going to get the sack if you haven't achieved or performed well. Then you can guarantee that they'll just smile. They'll put some spin on it, say we're not going to increase taxes, but we'll keep the thresholds the same, which basically means they're going to increase taxes. And they'll tell you all the things that they have but haven't done. For example, you as a ex-job, so you as a police officer, the police figures from when the Conservatives took power in 2010, I think it was roughly around 172,000 overall. It's now on 171,000 or thereabouts, so it's less than when they started, but the population has increased by over 6 million.
Yep.
So per capita, police numbers are down. So how can you expect, and then, obviously with the leadership with the police as well, I feel it's very difficult for them to really police the streets. They
don't want them to be policed. They do not want them to be policed. If you go into central London, the Mayor of London does not want robust policing, but will complain that kids are being killed in certain areas. And I see this all the time, the closure of the custody suite at Braintree. That's not effective, because what that's actually done is it means that officers now have to go to other parts of the county to take prisoners, which means that they arrest fewer people because they're tied up in other areas. And it's just ridiculous. And why am I paying my council tax? I'm a resident. Why am I paying my council tax here for policing that's taking place in Southend and Grays and Basildon? Yeah, I don't see, and I get it. People say, oh, there's no point in reporting it to the police. Well, actually, there's every point in reporting it to the police, because if the police don't know, you can't complain that they're not doing anything. And everybody should report it up. But that's my overall frustrations. But how do you feel about, the rhetoric that people say, well, if you vote for reform, you might as well be voting for the Labour Party? How do you feel about that? It's quite insulting, isn't it?
Well, I would say, yeah, it is insulting. I mean, especially in the national polls, Reform's now the second biggest party. So a vote for Reform is definitely a vote for Reform. I would say that if you're going to vote Conservative, that's probably something you should now consider. But ultimately, it's not a problem, I think, that really should be addressed with Reform. If someone's saying that, they should be thinking about the way in which we have our voting system. First past the post. Isn't going to give a lot of people a voice, really. If you live in a safe seat for Conservative or for Labour or for whatever party, and you feel that your vote that goes for any other party that isn't that main party that's going to get in probably quite easily in some cases, then you're not being represented, really, and that's a real shame. I mean, there's obviously a conversation that needs to be had about the way in which we do our votes, whether it's proportional representation or some other system. But I do think that how we've got it right now is completely wrong in that respect. But people should vote for. I mean, voting is very tribal. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've done a lot of canvassing, obviously, over the last few weeks. It's been very busy for me. But the support I've had is like, been pushing against an open door. There's been a lot of people that are really disenfranchised with the political class at the moment. They're not happy that they're being squeezed so much. There's the food banks has gone, from a few years ago to about 35 to now thousands. So really people are seeing it in their communities. It's not. Whether it be social care or anything else, it's not fit for purpose. We're relying a lot more on charities and things like that. And so people are at the point now where they really are fed up, and a lot of that support has come because there's no trust in the political class, and times are getting so difficult, and the only thing that they can see is more of the same coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Scandal. I mean, if there was a chart. I watched James Cracknell on the television the other day, and he described his own party as being a shower of shit. I mean, that is because he comes from an honourable sporting background. You come from an honourable military background. I'm from a police background. We don't like cheats. We don't like liars. We don't like people that are cutting corners in order to achieve their objectives, because actually, if you did that in the military, if you cut a corner, guess what? You've got a good chance of being dead.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
And a lot of the sort of I suppose ethos that you get from being in the military, and big one is integrity. It's not spin. It's not trying to create a false narrative. It's not always being popular. Sometimes you need to tell the hard truths, and it seems, like you said, with scandals, the moment we've got a new Conservative candidate getting in hot water for this betting scandal. They might be fleecing, the bookies for a few £100, but they've been fleecing the British taxpayer for thousands of their hard-working money for the last 14 years. So people are fed up with it, and you've had that, and you've had the sexting scandal and whatever else. It just seems to be that they're completely out of touch. There's no integrity there, So.
Well, I mean, we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but I have got a couple more questions if you're happy to answer them. But how do you feel about the accusation that the Reform Party are a right wing, extreme right wing? They've got elements of right wing within them. How do you feel about that?
I'd feel that a lot of the time when you challenge the establishment, and you challenge, I suppose, the status quo, there's always pushback with things. I think one of the easiest things to say if you don't agree with somebody is you slander them, or you say certain things. I mean, I won't name individuals, but we know that there's been from other parties where something's happened that you would say, right, okay, well, that's a racist comment, for example. But it seems to get not as much attention and media attention than if a reform candidate has said or done something and then they stand down. But I think Richard has done an excellent job over the last few years, and now Nigel has obviously came in as well. But if there's been any affiliation with other groups that are far right groups, then they've taken them out straight away. They're not people that represent the reform's values. And of course, with every party, I mean, I think the Greens have stood down about 20 candidates recently. So it happens in all parties, but you've got reform is changing the political landscape, and it's changing the establishment. So I mean, one of our policies is to remove the BBC license fees. So you imagine we're not going to get the best press there, right? But you have that sort of stuff that's happening, and people don't like the change. So if you're against I suppose the party because you politically persuaded in a different direction, then one of the easiest things is to slander and to say certain things about being a right-wing party. I don't think it's a right-wing party at all. I think that's an old way of looking at it, to be completely honest with you. I think that actually what reform is not a globalist. It's not anything like that. It's putting British values, morals and culture and hard-working people at the forefront of their policy-making, decision-making process.
Yeah, no, I was just sitting there listening because I'm thinking that, I mean, look, I'm going to be really honest with you. I would have liked to have stayed in Europe simply because I wanted my kids to have the opportunities to travel. And the other thing for me personally, it pushed the charges to take my dogs abroad through the bloody roof. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous now, but then that's another issue because the vets are making more money out of it, etc., etc. But Nigel Farage, I mean, he's a very divisive character. He's a great raconteur. I watched him on Question Time and on the things on the television. Do you have anything to do with him, and what is he like as an individual?
Well, I think, like you said, before, he can be, I suppose, divisive in some ways. People associate him, with Brexit and things like that. But from my experience with Nigel is that he's not afraid to say things that I feel need to be addressed and discussed and talked about, whether they're popular or not. And I think, to be completely honest, that really is quite important, especially now more than ever. Regardless of what you think of him, what he might be like personally, he's like everybody else. He's actually a very nice person. He has his opinions, and he's quite happy for other people to have completely different opinions. Especially in debate, or you talk to him, he's extremely approachable in that respect. So I think that's incredible. He's probably the best a commentator I think that we've had for a generation, really, the way that he is able to communicate and articulate his points across. But sometimes a lot of things he says, or a lot of things that he's done, I mean, look at the Brexit. That was by nature very divisive. The split was almost 50-50. So if you fell the other side on that debate, then obviously you're going to associate Nigel with that, and it probably will be something that you think about. But I would say that realistically, thinking about Nigel is that he is a strong leader. Regardless of whether you agree with everything or some things, he is a strong leader, and he is somebody that I think is really what the country needs at the moment.
Good answer, sir. Before we conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or correct in relation to what we've discussed today?
No, I think really a closing minute to sort of sum up, to your listeners, especially, not just in Braintree, but across the country, really, on the 4th of July, we do face a decision where everyone's going to make who they're going to vote for in the privacy of the voting booth for themselves. And I would say just have a think about how things have been run. And how you want things to sort of change into the future. I think that realistically now we've got an opportunity where we can hold accounts the out-of-touch politicians that really don't represent their constituents very well, that have made the sort of bad choices that we're all having to pay through higher taxes and through higher shopping, and whether it be mortgage payments and everything else. I think that it needs to be a big kick into the system now. It needs to be shaken up a little bit. So I think to have a look at the parties, what they're offering, don't be tribal, really sort of think about it. That's what I would say. Look at the policies, look at what you're voting for, and then make that decision with as informed as you can.
Richard Thomson, thank you so much for your time today. I wish you well on the 4th of July, and take care of yourself. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of this weather if you can.
Yes, I'll certainly try to. Thanks a lot, Paul. Thank you for your time.
Keep in touch. Cheers. Bye-bye.